Today I'm going to attempt to take a single-celled life form through billions of years of evolutionary development out across the vast reaches of space and to the center of the universe without taking any damage. So, that means if we're able to meet this guy, then the challenge will be complete. So, Spore is broken up into 5 stages of gameplay, each a separate game in its own right. Now, if you're watching this video, you probably have some understanding of how Spore works, so I won't really need to go into that. But, I mean, this should be pretty easy, right? After all, you can just play the game as a pacifist. Well, not really, or at all in fact. You see, every decision that you make in Spore will affect you later on in the game, so you can potentially completely screw this up without even knowing it until later on. But I'll explain the trials of each stage as we go through it. For now, we have our first decision to make, herbivore or carnivore. And it is going to have to be carnivore. This may seem counterintuitive and it will make the creature stage and tribal stage a lot more difficult, but just bear with me on this. And I named my planet Paper because all the top scientists will tell you that paper is the strongest and most resilient material in the known universe. Okay, so the first stage is going to be the cell stage. Now, obviously our objective here is to not take any damage. I'm a carnivore, so this is going to be difficult. Now, if I do take damage, I will have to exit the game without saving and then load up again from my previous save. So the first thing that we're going to have to do is consult our evolutionary tracker. This will give us a rough idea of how our decisions in the cell stage will affect us in later game. And this is exactly why I chose carnivore. In the civilization stage, I'll be granted the invincibility perk. And that's why it's not so straightforward as just doing a pacifist run. I really have to think about what I'm doing here. But luckily, at the start of the game, you are given meteorite pieces to eat, so initially you don't have to do any hunting, which is pretty cool. Of course, you still have to avoid the bigger creatures, and as you get bigger, they become more dangerous. Deciding it was time to evolve for the first time, I used the app on Plenty of Fish to find a mate. Get it? Because I'm a fish? It's funny? Maybe? No, probably not. I decided to add a second mouth for a bit of extra protection, and a couple of horns in order to fend off any aggressors. And this worked, for a little time at least. Unfortunately, I was far too slow, and in severe danger of getting hit by the bigger fish.
There's always a bigger fish.
So I decided to get rid of my horns and add some fragilla to make me a little bit faster. But there are always creatures that are faster, and this happened. So I was forced to exit the game, reload, and continue from where I left off. Luckily I'd saved recently, so not too much time lost. But I was still being chased by faster creatures. It was becoming harder and harder to get away from them. So I added some more fragilla, making me even faster still. Then these things shot out of nowhere and decided to stick their spouts into me. So I was just doing my best to scrape by on any meteorite pieces that I could find and avoid other creatures. Okay, that was a bit too close. As I evolved and grew faster, I began to be able to hunt a lot easier. And before long, not only was I nearly uncatchable, but I had actually completed the cell stage. A headache that burned hotter than the fire of 1,000 suns formed inside my skull. There was an explosion louder than anything I'd ever heard as a brain appeared inside my head. And with the brain came the development of legs and the promise of freedom on the dry land. So I'd say in most games of Spore, the creature stage is arguably the longest. I also find it to be one of the most rewarding. Well, unless you count the space stage that literally just never ends. So there is one more perk to being a carnivore, and that will be revealed in the tribal stage, but for now we had to look at our options for the creature stage. Now, objectively speaking, all of these perks will be useless to me no matter what path I choose. Now, you can actually get away with an aggressive build here, however, it will not benefit me at all. The best way to do this is to be social. So the objective of the creature stage, apart from to not get hit, is to collect as many parts as possible and gain DNA points for further development. Now I know what you're thinking, how are you going to get past the groks without getting hit? Even if you ally with them, they will end up hitting you at some point. But please just bear with me. Everything that I'm doing is building up to it. It's all extremely important. So I'd have to begin by socializing with the smaller creatures around my nests. I tend to only go for the alpha creatures as they are the only ones that will give you parts. Once I had met all of the smaller creatures, I headed back. A few creatures will naturally be hostile towards you, so in some cases I would have to charm the ones that would not give me anything just to prevent them from attacking me. I also picked up every single spare part that I could find. So in the early stages of the creature stage, so long as you don't stray too far from your nest, it's a pretty safe bet that nothing is actually going to hurt you. But with brain development comes bigger and better challenges. So now that I had enough DNA points, it was time to find a mate and evolve my species. And now for a quick biology lesson by WarmFuzzy Blanket. Step 1. The female will initiate a loud gargling sound similar to that of a cat being strangled. Step 2. The female will then proceed to dance in a circle while singing. This will complete the process of pregnation and lead to step 3, in which the female will wipe her feet before laying an egg. Notice that it is especially important that she lays her egg exactly where she wiped all the muck from her feet. This educational video was brought to you by WarmFuzzy Blanket Productions. So now I was able to add another member to my pack, so my social skills increased dramatically, making it easier to charm other species. We danced, we sang, we danced some more, we sang some more. My brain grew larger, and soon I had more members of my pack. My baby daddy ran off before our child was even born, and so I was left a single mother until my offspring were big enough and we chased him down. Up until this point, I hadn't really had to worry too much about starvation. Obviously, this is a no damage run, so I wasn't about to just go in and start fighting something. Luckily, when you do reproduce, your hunger meter gets refilled, which is what's been happening so far. However, on this occasion, I'd moved too far from my own nest, and I was starting to get very hungry. Of course, I couldn't actually kill anything because that would involve me taking damage at some point. As a carnivore, I would need to eat meat. And since hunting was completely out of the question, I would have to return to my nest in order to reproduce. This is how close I came to starving. Now, I am actually counting starving as taking damage, as you will actually die, so it's something I really need to avoid. And to be totally honest, the rest of the creature stage was pretty straightforward. Just a rinse and repeat process of singing, dancing, and generally socializing with other creatures. Oh, and the Grox visited my planet while I was in the creature stage. Just thought I'd mention that because I think that's really cool. So things seemed to be going well. I was allying with other creatures, making friends, and then I got side attacked. So by this point I'd already actually finished the creature stage and I was actually looking for wings and feet that would give me a high jump. However, I saved just before I got attacked, so this was now happening every time I reloaded, which means I'd have to finish the creature stage without getting the parts that I wanted, which was unfortunate. Moving on to the tribal stage, and things do begin to get difficult. You see, not only do you have other tribes to deal with, but you also have the other creatures that are around. As well as being a carnivorous race, I was going to have to find a way of getting some food without any of my tribe taking damage. So one of the perks of being a carnivore is that you get given traps in the tribal stage. This basically means you can set a trap for wild creatures that will kill them without you having to actually kill them yourself, therefore you don't have to take any damage. But now I have an entire tribe to think about, not just one creature. If any member of my tribe takes damage, I'll have to reload. Another thing that I have to worry about is when and where I save. You see, it's possible for me to put myself in an unwinnable position and save it there so that I can no longer progress with the challenge. In this situation, I had impressed the first tribe to become my allies, at which point 2 more tribes appeared. So I gave one of the tribes that hated me a gift so that they would at least not attack me for the time being. However, as I was heading back to my own village, one of the wild creatures decided that they wanted to attack me. I did my best to run away, but on closer inspection I could see that yes, they had in fact hurt me. So when I reloaded, I found I was essentially back at the start of the tribal stage before I'd impressed the first village. So I decided to pour all of my resources into fishing. I wanted to get enough food together that I wouldn't need to do any more fishing or hunting for the rest of the tribal stage. While I was collecting the necessary resources, a few more tribes appeared on the map. One of them once again hated me, so I decided to bring them a gift in order to make them neutral. However, once again, the rogue species decided to attack me. So, luckily I had actually just saved before I set off, so it was simply a case of reloading and trying again. This time I gave the wild species a wider berth and gave the tribe a present which made them neutral. I also gave the yellow tribe a present as they seemed the next likely to attack me. Once I was sure that I wouldn't be under threat of attack, it was then simply a case of just impress all of the tribes. As I impressed each tribe, I unlocked new tools such as maracas, didgeridoos, and very quickly the rest of the other tribes fell under my influence as well. I'd say the tribal stage was possibly the easiest of all the stages so far, with only 1 or 2 resets. I should tell you that I saved just before I impressed the last village, and there's a good reason for that, and there's a reason that I wouldn't be saving again until certain parameters would be met within the civilization stage. If I could not achieve what I needed, I would have to quit the game and reload back to my previous save in the tribal stage, but I'll explain why in just a moment. You see, everything I'd done so far had been leading up to the civilization stage, and I was either going to get things the way I needed them to be, or I'd have to quit and try again. In an ideal situation, you would be an economic race going into the civ stage. However, because you have to do the tribal stage socially, you will always end up religious. Now things get really difficult. My first objective, before the other civilizations appeared, was to claim all of the spice geysers on my continent. I had to avoid one for the time being, because there was an epic creature just outside my city that could easily destroy my vehicles. So, here's a question. I need to take over cities. In order to do that, I must attack cities, as I am not an economic nation and cannot buy them yet. So how do I do that? Billions of years of planning. So, cities that would appear would be randomly generated. Now, you need at least 4 cities before you can get planes, therefore I would need an economic city to appear on the same continent as me. I didn't have access to ports either, and so I sat and wait, building up my infrastructure and keeping an eye on the epic creature just outside my city. Eventually my waiting had paid off and I'd been given what I wanted. However, had this not been the case, I could have just reloaded back into my previous save from the tribal stage. Confident that I had what I needed though, I decided to save the game. I wouldn't get a better opportunity than this now. So my species is religious and relies on religious conversion in order to take over settlements, at least initially. So in order to take over the first economic city without actually taking damage, I would have to build a vehicle that is extremely high powered. I would have to sacrifice speed in order to do this, but I already had all of my vehicles outside of the city, so that wouldn't really matter. So this is the tool I'd be using, invulnerability. Hopefully, I could use it on my vehicles and take over the first city before it runs out. I'm actually not taking damage, and because I've got enough vehicles, I can actually take this over quick enough that the invulnerability doesn't run out. And now that I've got my first economic city, the rest of this is going to be pretty simple. I use bribes to try and make the other cities like me more so I don't get attacked. You also need to raise your disposition high enough in order to establish a trade route. But once you have a trade route established, you can simply just buy the cities. I managed to get the first city for a reasonable 16,000 spore bucks, although I imagined as my empire grew, it would cost a lot more money, but this would be okay because more cities equal more spore bucks. I began developing my cities, gaining more and more spore bucks, opening trade routes, and buying out other competitors. Really do have to keep a close eye on this alpha creature. I bought out city after city until eventually we developed air travel. This would make trading across the globe a lot easier. Now, something interesting happened after this. You see, by the time I had 6 cities, I had the ability to use the Fanatical Uprising superpower, which would basically finish the Civ stage for me. However, the other cities decided to actually join me voluntarily. Now, I hadn't actually anticipated this, and furthermore, I began to wonder if I had actually been able to just get them on side anyway without having to buy anyone out. I wasn't really sure if there was a diplomatic option for the Civ stage, certainly something I'd never done before anyway. I took the time to fully upgrade all my cities as well as giving them all turrets, as it's a lot easier and cheaper to do this now than it would be once we enter the space stage. So, at long last the time had come, time for us to reach the final frontier and try to get to the center of the galaxy. I built a pod racer to use as my spaceship. In the past, I've done things like X-Wings and Borg cubes, and generally all sorts of vehicles from sci-fi films. So now it was time to take to the stars, and this would arguably be the point where the run dies. To start with, as always, I had to get the arbitrary missions out the way. Scan a planet, scan another planet, make a colony. And this is where I had to be careful. You see, I had to colonize as few star systems as possible. So with the first colony in Credit Pack that I was given, I decided to pick a very rich star system, rich in blue spice. I needed maximum yield for minimum investment, and if I could find a star system with plenty of spice planets, I'd be off to a good start. I even found my first planet to be already at Terraform 1. This would make things so much easier. It allowed me to set up an initial investment producing blue spice. I figured that blue spice would yield quite a lot of Spore books. I also met other alien races around the galaxy that I would need to befriend so that they wouldn't attack me. In order to do this, I'd have to perform missions for them, as I didn't have enough money to bribe them yet. Now, unfortunately, there's going to be no way that I can do the Spore adventure missions because there's too much risk of taking damage. But you can always do the first one because that's just simply talking to a few people. So I performed a couple of missions to try and get some allies on side, especially the ones close to me. I couldn't have anyone attacking me as I headed towards the center of the universe. I began developing my first colony to Terra 3 so that I could start producing a lot more spice. I then used the spice that I'd gained in order to sell it to other empires to get more Spore books to reinvest in my colonies to produce more spice. With enough money behind me, I started bribing the other empires to become my allies. I began to open trade routes, continually investing in my colonies, expanding my spice production until money was no longer an issue. I started making some serious Spore books off the rarer spices. And what did I use this money for? Well, planet busters. So why do I need planet busters if I'm trying to not go to war with anyone or provoke anyone? Well, I mean, I was always going to try and ally with the Groks. It's kind of the only way. I actually did end up getting hit by some pirates that lured me to one of their planets, so I had to quit. But I do save often, so it wasn't really that much of a big deal. The big deal will be getting past the Groks. While I wait for my spice production to net an efficient yield, I started doing missions for my own colonies. You see, other races will send me on the Spore Galactic Adventure missions, which I can't really do. However, doing missions for my own colonies is a pretty safe bet. I also needed to be a level 5 diplomat in order to unlock the embassy, so I started going out exploring across the stars looking for other civilizations to ally with. I used the happiness rays to improve relations with some, and I bribed others. In some cases I had to bribe and use the happiness ray. Slowly but surely I began to gain more and more allies until I had 20 in total, unlocking the diplomat badge, which would give me access to the embassy. Okay, so once I felt I was finally ready, it was time to save. I had 2 embassies, 5 planet busters, a lot of money, I had level 5 insular drive. I mean, what could go wrong here? If I couldn't ally with the Groks, then I would definitely fail the challenge, but let's see what happens. So I came out the wormhole and I started to get closer to the center of the galaxy. I dropped my first planet buster near what I assumed to be the Grox. I didn't want to meet the Grox yet until I'd used all my planet busters, as this will give you a plus 50 bonus to your relationship with them. But then I realised that not only was I not near the Grox, but because I'd just broken the intergalactic code, the surrounding empires had just gone to war with me. Attempt number 1 had been an unmitigated disaster, so I decided to quit the game without saving. Attempt number 2, I accidentally bumped into the Grox before I'd used the planet busters, but I felt like this could still be salvageable. They didn't initially attack me, so I decided to start bribing them as much as I could. I also agreed to do missions for them, dropped an embassy and used the super happiness ray. Then, while I was away, I used all 5 of my planet busters, just to make sure that I got the plus 50 bonus to our relationship. After I'd done that, I returned to the Grox to find that my disposition with them was now 28, so I used the super happiness rate a little bit more to get it up further until I could establish a trade route. Once my disposition with the Grox was in the 50s, I thought I might not actually have to ally with them, as they seemed to be letting me through their space. So I decided, let's try and travel through Grox space. They don't seem to be attacking me. Everything seems to be okay. They actually like me, so they have no reason to... Oh, wait, here we go. Yes, even though I was on friendly terms with them, they still decide to start attacking me. So this, once again, was a failed attempt. So I'd have to reload and start the whole process again. So I had to bribe them, drop embassies, use the super happiness ray, complete missions, open trade routes... And let's not forget blowing up planets. And I was even able to bribe one of the local empires to end their war with me, so I didn't risk being attacked from them either. However, once I returned to the Grox, they started attacking me again. From what I'd seen, I was absolutely convinced that this was possible to achieve. You can ally with the Grox, that's no secret, but they always seem to just attack you. I was certain there was a way to do this without them ever attacking me. I'd come too far and I was just too determined to give up. I felt like the Grox would only attack you after you returned to them on a set number of times. Therefore, if I could get my disposition high enough without leaving them too much, I thought this might just be possible. I felt like the key to doing this was to blow up planets before I'd even met the Grox. This would give me a starting boost of 50 to my disposition with them. Then I could use bribes, drop an embassy, use the super happiness ray, and agree to do missions for them. Eventually I'd be able to establish a trade route. Furthermore, trade routes will take a little bit of time to increase your disposition with an alien race, so I just waited for it to take effect. I just sat perfectly still, not really doing anything, waiting for my disposition with them to rise. Well, actually, I did spend a little bit of time terraforming a planet that I colonized close by. When I checked again, I could see my disposition was getting higher, and then a second later, it was where it needed to be for me to form an alliance with them. So, daring to hope they wouldn't attack me again, I headed to their nearest star system and signed an alliance with the Grox. This put me at war with the entire galaxy, but that wouldn't matter anymore, as long as I could get to the centre quick enough. So now I was finally allied with the Grox without taking damage and was able to pass through Grox space safely. Unfortunately, being this close to the centre means that your travel radius will be decreased due to the heightened gravity, and it can be really difficult to navigate your way through Grox space, as there will be some planets where you can't jump between them, so you have to go back on yourself and find another route around. Another thing I was worried about is while I was doing this, my colonies had every chance of coming under attack. But thankfully that didn't happen, and at long last, after many minutes of searching for a correct route, I'd made it to the centre of the galaxy and beat Spore without taking damage. Okay, so what can I say about this challenge? Traditionally, Spore is a pretty short game. You can get from the cell stage to the space stage in a matter of hours normally. But with all the trial and error, as well as learning new facts about this game, it took me a really long time to work out exactly how I was going to do this. Also, I really didn't think I was going to make it past the Grok, so I'm super happy that I was actually able to finish this challenge. So I know this is a different game franchise from the ones I normally do, but I'm looking to expand and try new games, see how it goes, see how you guys respond to it. So let me know in the comments, and I'd just like to thank you very much for watching today. Please like, subscribe and all that good stuff. Leave any comments if you do have any, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.